Number one, we're just going to clarify what is remote staffing. We're going to also talk about strategy. It really does come into play, especially if you're utilizing remote staffing outside of your organization. So not necessarily just full-time employees that are working remotely, but you're actually working with a remote staffing firm, such as ourselves. You really want to sit down and make sure you're selecting the right strategy. So we're going to talk about that. How remote staffing with XCM works. So just in general, we're going to go over the overall process XCM is a component of. And then we're actually going to dig into some key features of XCM workflow. So very specific features that we recommend using, how we recommend using them, and get into detail there. And then we're going to end with a step-by-step guide. We're not going to talk through every single step in the guide. We're not going to have time for that today, but I did think it'd be helpful to at least throw the slides up on the screen. That way, if anyone was interested to go back and pause the recording and see what that content is, that should be helpful for you when you're putting all of this together back at your firm. That being said, if any questions come up throughout the webinar, feel free to post them in the questions toolbar, and I will be happy to address them as they come up. So first off, what is remote staffing? So it sounds pretty intuitive, but they're basically workers that are not physically present on your business premises. We hear outsourcing be thrown around a lot, and honestly, we were calling our solution Xpitax Outsourcing for quite some time. We still are in many, many cases. But really what it is remote staffing, and what sets remote staffing apart from outsourcing is the bullet number 2 right here that we're looking at, which is that they're assigned to the firm, and they work exclusively for that firm. Versus outsourcing would be more of a pooling situation where you're signing up with a firm and you're sending work and you're not necessarily having that dedicated team approach. So we have kind of shifted in calling our solution remote staffing, especially recently. So that's why we're talking about it today. And then when it comes to our solution, of course, we take care of hiring, recruiting, training, and managing our own staff here in our Xpitax solution, so that we take that burden off of the firm so that you can focus on growing out your clients and your strategy. This is a look at some key services, both on the tax and the CAS side, that are quite frequently sent to remote staffing within accounting firms. Now, client accounting services, we know it's not just bookkeeping. It's a common misconception when you hear client accounting services, probably not if you're in the industry, but maybe those outside the industry might not realize. It's a lot more than just bookkeeping, write-up, and after-the-fact reporting. You can see over to the right, there's a long list of other things that it includes, going all the way up to virtual CFO services, controllership, and business advisory, which is ultimately where you want to be with your client accounting services department. And don't be afraid if you're not there yet. Many of us are, if you're starting up a CAS firm, or maybe you're in the early stages, it's very common to not be there yet. And that's really what remote staffing helps you get to. And we're going to see that here in this visual. So where remote staffing typically falls on this spectrum is more towards the write-up and business process outsourcing at the beginning, so that we can take care of, and when I say we, I'm talking about our remote staffing solution, can take care of the write-up and really the AP, the collections efforts, cash management, reconciliation, so that you and your skilled staff can focus on the client relationship and giving them that future-looking insight and information, whether it be tax planning or you're helping them with a big decision that's coming up, whatever that may be, and really modeling things out for them, looking ahead. Really helping them keep up with their business is what you're looking to do. And as we know, the write-up work, that's not going to go away anytime soon, and it's very time consuming and very important to get right. So you can't just skip ahead to the top of the advisory spectrum without getting the transactional stuff right, which is really where we help our customers out the most. This is a survey of the top challenges, and it says 2018, but I'll tell you I've seen a lot of different surveys in this aspect, and we actually perform a lot of our own polling and surveys, and time again we see that recruiting and retention is #1 on the challenges list for client accounting services departments. There's a lot of reasons for this that we hear, but ultimately talent can be hard to come by, #1. And #2, job hopping is a little bit more common now, a little bit more acceptable now. It can be harder to retain that quality talent. And one of the ways you can retain that talent is to give them a little bit more work-life balance, to keep them challenged, and to get them out of that mundane data entry work that a lot of the talent today really is not interested in doing. So that's, again, where that remote staffing can come in so that you and your top talent can focus on the higher level stuff that they went to school for, that they're interested in, and that really keeps them challenged and helps grow their career in the right direction. We talked about some of this just now, addressing the recruiting challenge, also the inability to grow the CAS practice due to lack of resources. Again, that kind of speaks to how time-consuming a lot of the transactional work can get. And if you don't have a solution to take care of that transactional work, it's really difficult to get into growth mode. As far as processes and streamlined efficiencies, again, if you have different staff doing things a different way, and people are not necessarily united on how they're doing things and how they're exchanging information, it can be very difficult to, again, get to that advisory level and to stop from falling behind when you do lose staff. So if you don't have everything streamlined in one centralized location, it can be very difficult to lose a key employee. So we're going to look at a lot of features of XCM later on today that really helps protect your firm, really, and make sure that the work is exchangeable between your employees and staff, and that you're not losing that key client information to get the job done. Now we're going to go into strategy and selecting the right strategy for your firm. So we truly do believe strategy drives success, probably in every aspect of any business, right? But especially with remote staffing. You can't just kind of go into it without a clear plan. And we do have consultants here that absolutely can help identify the right strategy for your firm. But here's some key items to consider. So clear objectives and staff buy-in, we have that as #1. Honestly, even if all of the partners of the firm and the top managers believe in the remote staffing model and the remote staffing solution, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to make a remote staffing program successful unless you have the full buy-in of your staff. So it's sitting down with them, it's making clear what's in it for them. Some of the things I mentioned earlier, the fact that you're really not losing anything, you're gaining more time back in your day, you're gaining more challenging work, and really you're gaining that work-life balance that everybody is looking for. An outsourced coordinator, we're going to actually dig in a little bit deeper on what that means, but it definitely helps when it comes to strategizing and to keep everything moving forward in the right direction. Client and task selection, we'll talk about in a moment. There's different strategies that you can use depending on how you're internally structured. Defining your tech stack, that's just so important. We could have a whole special webinar on tech stack at another time. That's how important that conversation is. But just making sure you know what it is you're offering, you've got that expertise, you've got that strategy down. It really helps with a remote staffing solution. XCMWorkflow, of course, we're going to see today why that can be so important, and I don't have to tell any of you because everyone who's in this webinar is already an XCMWorkflow customer, so we definitely appreciate that and hope that we can share with you some exciting tips and tricks today. And when it comes to our Xpitax FTE full-time equivalent, like I mentioned, they're part of your team when you sign on with us. That becomes very important in terms of being able to continually add on. So you could start out with one strategy and then keep adding to what it is that your remote staffing is handling and build up that expertise within your team. We do see this as a true partnership with the firms that we work with. When it comes to internal structure driving strategy, here are three structures that I would say I see most commonly when I'm working with firms, both with the remote staffing and just to implement XCM for their CAS departments. Number one is all management level, which actually is cropping up more and more commonly, and I even see some firms trying to shift to this structure. And what that basically means is that you're upskilling your talent in-house. So you're really being careful in selecting the right people to work on your internal team who can do those high-level reviews, who can go to that advisory level, and also not at the same time not feel extremely threatened by the remote staffing solution because they see it for what it is. It truly is just enabling your firm, again, to get to that next level. So if you were to have that sort of internal structure, we see that they send almost everything of a data entry type of work to their remote staffing individuals through XCM. So it's almost all of the transactional work, no matter what client it is, ends up getting sent to the remote staffer. Then there's the team approach. So you could have a team approach. This can also be really effective where it really just depends on how big your CAS department is and your service lines that you're offering. But the kind of teams that we're seeing out there is perhaps by accounting platform. So maybe you have a dedicated QuickBooks Online team and they live and breathe QuickBooks Online. They handle all of the QuickBooks Online, or Bill.com for that matter, or Sage Intacct, etc. You could also have it by service line. So you could have a closing team, an advisory team, an AP team, payroll team, etc. Niche work is also very important, and because it's so specialized from a knowledge standpoint, it's not uncommon to see niche teams crop up. So you might have a medical niche team, a restaurant niche team, manufacturing, etc. So if you have the team approach, what we find most effective to implement remote staffing or to improve your remote staffing is to carve out certain pieces within each team that are suitable for remote staffing. And as you can imagine, it would depend on the type of team. So if it's a Bill.com team, maybe it's all the bill entry and you're managing the cash flow and actually making the payments, etc. If it's a payroll, it would probably be everything leading up to the actual pushing through of the payroll. So it really will vary. Same thing with the niches. So that's where you would see a different strategy when it comes to remote staffing. Collaborative group approach, it could mean a couple different things. The way that we're going to talk about collaborative group approach today is if you have basically a bunch of jacks of all trades, right, which can also be really effective because everybody's cross-trained, anyone can do a payroll run, everyone knows QuickBooks Online and Bill.com, and you expect all your individuals to be responsible for the review of maybe the clients that they're responsible for and growing out the firm as a whole. So when it comes to that type of approach, it's important to get everybody together and really just determine the best type of task to send over to the team. So again, if everybody's doing everything, just figuring out where you would get the most value. And again, you don't have to do that alone. That's where our Lean Six Sigma consultants and our implementation and client service teams can really sit down with you and help you make these valuable decisions. So I posed the question to you today, what best describes your firm's internal structure? Just food for thought to consider on your own, and if you were, or if you are utilizing remote staffing, where would your firm fall on this spectrum here? So when it comes to the type of work to send, we talked a lot about that a moment ago. This is from our perspective when we're taking a look at the remote staffing that we offer through Xpitax. This is what we most commonly process, and I say we do it most well and most often. You can see there are some special project categories beyond just the regular. I'm sure most of you were probably already picturing things like bank feeds and bank reconciliations, loan reconciliation, AP/AR, et cetera. But we also get into some special projects too, so that's where it truly is a staffing solution, where if you have the need for it and you can carve it out in terms of process, et cetera, we absolutely, from our remote staffing solution, are able to handle it to allow you and your team to focus on some of this other stuff, which is the type of work that we typically recommend keeping. This is best suited by your internal staff who's closest to your clients. So number one, direct client relations, communication, advisory, consultation, et cetera. Definitely source.collection unless you implement a piece of technology for that, which there's more and more coming out today, and more utilization in terms of document fetching. Moving money. It's a very high-risk area. I'm sure you can imagine why we definitely leave that to either your team, or again, there's some pieces of technology that do this very effectively as well. So when it comes to actually, making that cash push or pull. Live access to client banking credit cards. That's one of the access pieces that we do stay away from. We ask to not be given that live access. I'm sure you can imagine why, as CPAs yourself. And policy and procedure management, so change management, new procedure implementation and documentation, rolling out new things firm-wide, and training programs, and of course, that high-level efficiency and effectiveness review. And also firm administration, very, very important, and we don't take that over for you. Of course, we can do projects for your firm administrator, no problem at all, but as a whole, of course, you still need that firm administration component. So getting into how CAS remote staffing with XCM works, we see it as three crucial components. And we offer all three here, and we definitely believe that you do need all three in tandem to be successful. So the people, that's our Xpitax solution. We have a few bullet points there just to explain how we manage our people with our training curriculums that's been developed throughout the past 12 plus years we've been working with our remote staffing solution, our dedicated team approach, and we do have experienced supervisor review of all files because for that quality control management, which is very, very important to us. Our processes have been refined since 2002. We have best practice playbooks depending on what industry, what department you're in, I should say. So we've got the CAS best practices, tax and audit, et cetera, that we can draw upon. And also technology, obviously for us, it's XCMWorkflow, but when we're talking about our remote staffing solution, that's where your tech stack is also very, very important. So you want to make sure you can check the box on all three of these within your firm. And if you can't do that today, that's absolutely fine, and I'm sure not everybody can. So it just gives you really some direction as to where to hone in on maybe this coming year, and maybe get in touch with your XCM consultant and see how we can help you in any one of these areas. This is just to give you a quick shot of what our Xpitax team structure looks like. I mentioned it's a dedicated team approach a few times, and this is just kind of what it looks like. So the preparers down where it says full-time equivalent, those are the full-time equivalents that are dedicated to your firm, and then you can see above them is the supervisor I mentioned for the quality control, and then we have a team manager as well that they all flow up into, who really helps with the higher level stuff, communication, making sure that everyone's doing what they need to be doing, et cetera. And then of course we have a rigorous training coordination program, and our department head who I work most closely with just to make sure everything is going smoothly and everyone's happy. This chart right here just kind of sums up not only how our remote staffing solution works, but how the process probably works within your accounting firm today, whether you may realize it or not, especially if you're using XCMWorkflow. This probably mirrors what you're doing today. So it's nice to look at it in this graphical form. So basically you can see in the upper left-hand corner, new CAS client, that's you and your figurative prospects doing business with one another. Of course, the source docs right in the middle, there's nothing that an accounting firm can do without them. So they can be shared in various different ways with your accounting firm, and it all feeds up into your accounting firm. And then it goes down to the bottom left-hand corner. So you're entering the project in XCMWorkflow, or more realistically, if you've got our consultant's ear, we definitely encourage recurring tasks for client accounting services. So it probably is already sitting there in XCMWorkflow to pick up and go ahead and move once your source docs are in. And then you can move it to your remote CAS staff member. If you are utilizing Xpitax, you can move it to your outsource coordinator, who then moves it to Xpitax, or if you have a different strategy, you can move it directly to us. So there's a little flexibility there with how the work gets sent to your staff member, and we'll expand upon that today as well. And then, of course, your accounting applications is where the work actually gets completed. So, so that's right in the middle between the remote staff member and the completed CAS work. And then in orange, you can see a few different statuses. It kind of goes in a little loop there because we recognize that there could be a questions posted, questions answered cycle, reviewed points, open and cleared, and also a firm review cycle before it's actually completed. And then your accounting firm would then deliver that highest level review, right? And then advise with your firm, with your clients, I should say, to make sure that their business is heading in the right direction. So that's in a nutshell how we see the process to work with the firms that utilize XCM. Now is where we want to dig in on some very important components of workflow for CAS in general, and also specifically as it applies to remote staffing. So these are 6 key CAS workflow elements, and you'll see you don't really see the word XCM in any one of these, because while we certainly have a solution for every single one, we wanted to look at the highest level and say, what are the 6 key components, regardless of workflow program that you're using, regardless if you're using a remote staffing, that we really believe need to be in place in order to have a well-oiled machine that that will catapult your firm to the growth and scalability that it's capable of. So we can see standardization. We're going to dig in on what some sample processes are, so that the work I mentioned earlier, so that it's repeatable and so that it's centralized into one set process that everybody agrees upon. And if there's any suggested improvements, the staff is probably more apt to raise that improvement idea to their manager if they're following a set procedure than if they were just kind of off on their own. And let's say they come up with a better way, well, maybe they're going to assume that, how are they to know that someone else hasn't already thought of it, right? So it's good to get everyone on the same page. Delegation. Certain workflow programs can be a little bit more linear than allowing you to actually be able to delegate work within a task and work on the same task at the same time. How this translates to XCM is assigning out the checklist items. We should see that at some point in this presentation in terms of how you can delegate those items while maintaining control of the task. Communication. We see this come up time and time again as a limitation, especially if you are trying to work with remote staffing without properly utilizing XCM, because you could be on different time zones, you could just be in different schedules. So it's important to be able to track that knowledge and review points and things of that nature in a centralized, electronic, cloud-based solution. Predictability, that's where you really want to know what's coming in the future. Don't want to fly by the seat of your pants in this industry. You definitely, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, you need to know what's coming up. And also, not just what's coming up, but where your gaps are. So, where can you backfill work into? Are you busiest the first and second week of the month? Is it, do you have time in every single day? Is it only the last week of the month? How does your work spread out? Well, by using recurring tasks and then reviewing them in the recurring task report, you can have that visibility and predictability into, where your gaps are, how to sell to those new firms, and how to staff. collaboration. So that just speaks to the ability to electronically assign, reassign, and manage staff work without ever getting up from your desk, writing an email, making a phone call. And then visibility, which is at the crux of everything that XCMWorkflow offers, which is, the who, what, when, where, and why, ultimately. And again, this is kind of a pick list as well. You want to make sure, especially, you're using XCM already, so do an inventory. Are you able to check off all of these boxes? And if you're not, get together with us, or perhaps you'll learn something today that can help you check that box off in the future. This is a sample workflow mapping that we believe, we know actually works very well. We use this or something very similar for most of the firms that use our remote staffing solution. It tends to translate to many different task types as well. Where we see some differentiation is perhaps the role names on the firm side are a little bit different. Perhaps anything after firm review might be added depending on the task type. So for example, if it's payroll, you might have some subsequent, after it's been reviewed, you might want it to go into processing, et cetera. So you can definitely tweak this to fit the task type and to fit how your firm works. But ultimately, this is a very transferable, translatable workflow mapping that we wanted to share with you today. You can see in orange, there's the OS coordinator, and we will define a little bit of where, what we view the OS coordinator to mean as well. So just keep that in mind. In this workflow, we have it, the OS coordinator receiving the task and ready for preparation. So think about it this way. So the task recurs to the person who owns the task, or the client, right? The person responsible for making sure that task gets done. And you figure out who that is and you have it pushed to them. Then it goes to source document collection. And then this again depends on your firm. So do you have someone dedicated that's handling that, or is it the person who owns the task? So we do carve it out as its own status so that you can identify the tasks that are awaiting source document collection completion versus ones that just have freshly recurred to somebody's MyView page. That's where we see the ready for preparation. So let's say I'm the manager and I have all my source docs ready and I'm ready to send it to my remote staffing solution. You can send it to that ready for preparation status to your OS coordinator, and that's going to help centralize everything. It's going to help make sure that prioritization jives with one another, because let's say you have, 5+ managers who are going through the process of receiving the recurring tasks and collecting the source documents. If they all just directly feed it to your remote staffing solution, depending on how many full-time equivalents you have over at the remote staffing level, there definitely could be some competing priorities, and you really don't want your remote staff, their time to be eaten up by kind of trying to figure out and decide, who gets the work done first if there are competing priorities. So if you are able to dedicate part of somebody's job to be the OS coordinator, and we can help you determine who the best person is, it definitely helps just smooth out the process. Okay, now, and that's not to say that we don't have many firms we work with that enable their managers to send the work directly to our remote staffers. And I would say in that case, all it takes at the firm end to supplement that there's no OS coordinator is a touch point, at least once a week internally to plan and make sure you know what the other managers are going to be expecting out of the remote staffer. And as long as you have that internal touch point, I would recommend weekly, if not bi-weekly, then it can still be very successful. And then you can see some standard statuses that you're probably familiar with, preparation, review, questions posted, etc. I will mention the awaiting client info can be helpful, because if your remote staff person sends you questions in XCM as questions posted, it can be helpful to have this extra status so that, let's say if I'm looking at my MyView page and I've received 10 tasks back from the team, and some of them are in questions posted, and then I have to pass those questions on either to someone internally or to my client. it can help to change the status to something like awaiting client info, so that, you know, for your own sanity, when you're looking at your MyView page, you know, okay, I have done something with this, it's in the client's hands. And then it would come back to your remote staffer. You could, again, have that one-way traffic control to your OS coordinator. So once the person responsible for the client has the answers to the questions in XCM, they could send them to that OS coordinator. Because, again, if it's something that's going to take the time of your remote staffer, and you do have an OS coordinator, you likely want to run that through them so that it's on their radar. They know that it's going to take up some of the remote staffer's resources, right? And then your OS coordinator would then feed it to the remote staff in questions answered for further processing. And then it just finishes out the process. You can see on the screen, firm review. You might have an open review points, cleared review points process. A lot of the time, and you can see we have them not mapped in the suggested workflow, because if it happens only some of the time, what we say is to just turn the statuses on, and you don't necessarily need to map them in, and that definitely depends on how your firm works and what you decide with your XCM consultants. So I did want to spend a little bit of time just explaining this workflow because, again, it's very, very effective for us, and we use it time and time again. This is just to clarify, again, I talked a lot about OS Coordinator just now, so just to give you a few more tips and tricks for if you do have an OS Coordinator. They should be, if you have one, the controller of all task traffic to your remote staffing solution. And you can see we built that into the workflow we looked at a moment ago. The OS coordinator would rely on the due date information being set by that account owner that I mentioned. So we have it as the firm reviewer role, but whoever that account owner is. And you can see ADD there. I'm going to show you where that is in XCM. It's anticipated delivery date. We find this field really effective to use for remote staffing because it's a date field that isn't necessarily going to be in use by for any other purpose other than the one that we're talking about here. So operationally, the way it would work is the account owner would set the anticipated delivery date. So let's say, so we're February 17th right now. Let's say I'm the account owner and I had something that's ready to go and I want to send it to ready for preparation. Well, if I need the task back to me by Friday to be able to get the deliverable to my client, then when I send the task to the OS coordinator, I probably want to set the ADD to be Wednesday, Thursday at the latest. That way I have at least one day to review and turn the task around. So in that case, as the account owner, I would set the ADD to be February 19th, with today being the 17th, or the 20th at the latest, if I need to get something to my client by the 21st. So then in XCM, you would use the due date field for the 21st, which is when you actually need to send something back to your client. So hopefully that makes sense. We will see a separate slide on the ADD today as well. And you can see the third bullet, users should be as realistic as possible with ADDs. So, you know, notice I didn't say Tuesday, the 18th, right? Because then I'm putting unnecessary pressure on, let's say, the OS coordinator and the team. Whereas if a fellow manager actually really needs something back by Tuesday, I might be getting in the way of that and causing unnecessary communication internally to get that all sorted out. So we always encourage everyone use the ADD, but also make sure you're being reasonable and realistic about it. It'll just help everything go smoothly. And then I mentioned that the OS coordinator is one way of all the tasks going to your remote staffing. There really is not a need for the tasks coming back from your remote staffing to go through the OS coordinator, because the tasks coming back are either going to have questions posted for the account owner, or they're going to be ready for review from someone at your firm. In some cases, people, you know, firms might have the OS coordinator able to answer questions, but that would be, you know, a firm by firm situation. So in most cases, the OS coordinator is just that one-way controller. And then, of course, we recommend all task-specific communication be kept in XCM points to enable the electronic flow of information back and forth. So we're going to see as well today that XCM Points really acts as the communication tool where all of your task-specific communication should be kept, and you can have that back and forth communication right in there. And then the way that our solution works, I mentioned, I'm going to talk about Xpitax because that's what I'm most familiar with here. We do allow email and we hold recurring calls, usually bi-weekly, just to keep in touch with our firms, and we find it very effective because there might be some items not appropriate for XCM. There might be additional training to roll out on screen. There might be tips and tricks that our firms and their managers and their coordinator want to share with us, and just talk about feedback, talk about future plans, how things are going. So while we definitely want to keep the task-specific information in XCM, that's not to say that there shouldn't be other touch points that are valuable as well. So we're going to dig right in to checklists. So this is where you're streamlining your processes. I talked a little bit about it earlier when I said you don't want everyone doing something, the same task differently within your firm. So to some extent, you should be able to, most firms I should say, are able to unify a set of procedures by task type to map out what it is that should be done. So if it's a monthly close, for example, this is what we're seeing on the screen right now. If you want to direct your attention to, let's say, 5 through 15, right? Or actually 5 through 8, just to look at a few of them, right? So check opening balances against prior period. That's pretty generic. You should probably, if this is your firm and you've selected this as a checklist, that's going to apply across all of your monthly closes. That's something your firm identified is a very important step to take. Checklist number 6, prepare reconciliations, bank, credit cards, loan accounts. You can see how we worded that generic. You might also have a separate checklist for prepare bank reconciliations, prepare credit card reconciliations, prepare loan reconciliations if you want it to be its own checklist item. But keep in mind, we're not saying prepare the Bank of America 5333 reconciliation, right? You don't need to get that granular with checklists. There certainly can be the inclination to make your checklist very custom like that. And within XCM, we absolutely allow the flexibility to be able to do that. It's a matter of settings. You just want to work with your consultant if you're not sure how that works. However, what you lose a little bit is the ability to globally manage your checklist. So let's say if I wanted to add a couple of checklist items that are really important to me, or tweak a checklist item that's in here, like if instead of 45 days, if you're looking at checklist number 7, instead of 45 days or older not cleared, maybe I want to change it to 60 days. Maybe I realized 45 is too soon, right? Now, if you use the default checklist approach where I have one default checklist for all monthly closing task types, I can, in seconds, make that change and push it out to all active tasks if I choose to do so. So personally, I tend to lean towards recommending the default by task type checklist, but there definitely are cases where you might need to have the task-specific checklist as well. So that being said, there's a couple other examples in here. So this just shows you, again, the closing monthly checklist sample. One thing to highlight here is where you see CLMO 10, 20, 30, 40, etc. Just a little tip there. It's a way to set up your checklist by number. That's the checklist item name would be the number, and then it's separated by a colon there. So that enables you to be able to squeeze some in between and keep a numbering system. So let's say I want to add something between 40 and 50, I would just call it 41. So if you do it this way, then it enables you to sort your checklist column by number. There's a few different reasons where this tends to come in handy, but I don't think that today I want to get that granular with the training, but just a little word of advice, if you're setting up your checklist, it can be good to number them like that. So XCM points. So I mentioned with checklists, we really don't have to get too granular, But then the question might become, well, okay, but there's a lot of client-specific information that I need to track somewhere. So if I'm not doing it in my checklist, how can I make sure that this really important information is tracked within the task itself and carries forward with the task? So the answer is XCM points. We recommend to put your client-specific nuances in as a knowledge or instruction point and mark it as permanent if it will always indefinitely apply to the task. The examples you see on the screen are basically the format that we tend to recommend. You'll notice the use of the reference column. So picture the same example without that reference column, if you just kind of put your hand over the reference column, and how much clearer this all becomes if you have that reference there. So you can just quickly see, okay, this is information on bank fees, loans, or payroll. I absolutely push for the use of that reference column. It just makes everyone's lives easier. And then also, if on a firm level you want to decide what you want those categories to be, and then make sure every, let's say, monthly closing client has a note in each of those categories, just to get that much more streamlined, so that one person isn't calling it bank feed, but the other one's calling it, you know, just bank or something. And then you'll notice the use of the bulleting. You can definitely do different formatting within the point itself in XCM to make things stand out. I definitely like the bulleting, the numbering, and the highlighting. If you get too crazy with the formatting, it can get out of hand, but they definitely can be valuable to make certain items stick out. So if it was a case where you wanted the person to know that this client has a Bank of America 5333 and an Amex 10001, you know, you could put that type of stuff here. But you can notice in our examples is that we're saying, okay, in this case, the client posts their own bank and credit card fees. That might not be the case for all of your clients. So you don't have to worry about that in the checklist area. In the checklist area, say, reconcile the bank account. In the points area, give us some more color as to how the reconciliation process works. Also, take advantage of being able to add points in bulk. So if you have 50 clients that post their own bank and credit card feeds, and this exact point is the case, make sure you take advantage of adding them in bulk, because if you locate those tasks, you can select all 50 of them, click add point, and you can add the point to all of them very easily. That same process applies if you have something special that you want to promote across all of your monthly closing clients or all of your payroll clients, and you're the owner, or you're the person responsible for this program. You can very easily go into XCM, select all of the tasks that you wish to add the point to, and you can very easily just put that on everybody's radar with the click of a button. You don't have to mark it permanent if it's just a current period promotion. Let's say you just started offering payroll services and you want to make sure you're having conversations with your clients about that. Add a point to all of your monthly closing clients about, you know, your payroll service that you want to promote. So that's just an example. I purposely spent a lot of time here because it's so valuable. I can't say enough clearly about this piece. And then when it comes to the other types of points, questions, we typically recommend that you save the question type of point for your remote staffing to originate. So this just makes it so that if there is a question point in there, you kind of, you have some standardization as to who's originating it. It does have the person's initials in the by whom column, but we find that it's effective to say, okay, remote staffing, if you have anything come up when you're doing the work, use the question type of point. And then, of course, on the firm's end, you would be putting the responses in. You would be popping them out to an email like you see right here and sending them either internally or to your client if you choose to do so. So that's typically what we find works best. And then review points on the flip side, you should reserve the review type of point to be originated by the firm in a remote staffing setup. So we're, as the remote staff person, posting questions when we have something come up, and then when you're reviewing the task, if something comes up, you're going to originate a review point. And then if you choose to send it back to your remote staffing team to be further processed, then your remote staffing team would fill the responses in. So that's just something that we've found really effective, wanted to share with you today. I promised that I would show you what the anticipated delivery date looks like. It's right in your due date section of your routing sheet. That's what that top right-hand screenshot is. And it's just a quick calendar, flexible due date that you can set. We utilize it for remote staffing. Let's say you're not using remote staffing, it's just a softer internal deadline. You can see in the example we're showing that the due date is the 20th. We definitely don't want to touch that. We want to know when something is owed to the client. When did you promise something to the client? That should always be your due date, driven by the deliverable section. Versus the anticipated delivery date, that is a moving target. So I could have it be the 8th today because I'm sending you half the work today. And then the work comes back to me on the 11th. Maybe I want to sit on it till I get the rest of the information in and then change the ADD to the 17th. So you definitely can continue to change the ADD as the task progresses, as it makes sense to do so. And again, that's a tool that's going to help your OS coordinator prioritize, and it's also drastically going to help once your remote staffing receives a batch of tasks, because they can just sort by ADD, they can know what your expectations are, and if for some reason they're unable to meet it, or if they need additional time, they know what the expectation is so that they can give you a heads up and work with you and figure out how to make sure that no due dates are missed. I don't want to forget to mention recurring tasks. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. I can't say enough good things about them. It helps know what work is coming. It helps make sure that these tasks are automatically going to be there without even thinking about it. So if you've got a CAS department, you have recurring work, and it goes so far to take the extra piece of time at the initial setup, or as you, let's say, add a new client to get those recurrence patterns set up, you're going to save so much time and headaches. And then also the things that we're talking about today that roll forward, like your permanent points, you're going to get the benefits of that. So if I set a task up for the February close and I put permanent points in, if that's on a recurrence pattern, my March task is going to pull my permanent points in April, and so on. And if I change it in April, the changed points will come through to May. So there's so many things like that that you get out of the recurring task feature. So definitely set that up if you haven't already. And then just quickly, I just wanted to mention, because it's such a hot topic, new client onboarding and the fact that you can and should and absolutely, it helps you become so organized. It's just a great tool to use XCM for your new client onboarding. You can see a quick screenshot. If you look at the associate status column, you can see how it progresses: engagement letter to scope review, to kick off to client setup, et cetera, just to make sure that your new client onboarding, your first impression of your client goes well, especially in client accounting services, right? So, and it depends on what services you're offering. But for example, if you're offering several different services like sales tax, payroll, et cetera, advanced AP services, then when you sign that client up, you're going to want a concise list of what needs to get done. You know, do I need to implement Bill.com? What does that mean, right? And if there's things like that, you might not have a whole list of all the checklist items to implement Bill.com in your new client onboarding task type, but what you might have in your new client onboarding task type is a checklist item that says, if AP client set up a Bill.com implementation task, right? So you're triggering somebody to go set up that other task type that's already fully built out, which is a Bill.com implementation task type. So all of these things can kind of interconnect and make sure that you take care of every single important item for your new clients. And you can assign out those checklist items. This is where that delegation comes into play. So maybe I fire out that checklist item to create the Bill.com implementation task to the person responsible for Bill.com implementation. So you can get really smart with it, and we're happy to work with you on that. And then this is just a quick look at what the onboarding workflow could be if you're using XCM to manage new client onboarding. All right, quick pro tip that we wanted to share with you today. So this is for advanced users. If you've already heard so many new things that you want to do, you can probably turn your ears off now and come back to this later, because this is more for if you've already, gotten a lot of these other things set up. But I definitely wanted to share this idea with you today. So you can use XCM for scope management, especially as the industry moves towards fixed fee and value billing. So what I mean by that is, so a lot of people are using QuickBooks Online, right? And there's this client overview spot that you can go to in QuickBooks Online. You can see on the screen right now where that's located, and you can set the period of time. I'm sure a lot of you might already know this, but just in case you haven't trickled upon this yet, you can set the period of time and it gives you the volumes, which is so awesome if you're value billing, to understand what the amount of work was for that client. So there's a few things you can do in XCM to take advantage of things like this, or even if let's say you're working in a program that doesn't have this, you have a place to put this valuable information so you can then analyze it later. So one of the things you can do is you can utilize custom fields. You can see it's built out below. You can, your bank account transaction volume, 88, your AR invoice transaction volume in this case was 0. They're not very heavy in that area, et cetera, right? So that's step number 1. Step number 2, you would then create an advanced save search with the certain columns that you need, and you could export that to Excel, or you could use that to analyze and manage your billing. You can see there's a fee amount custom field, so if you charge your different clients different amounts, you can also have that be a custom field and have a billing report with an advanced search. So there's a lot of things you can do, right? And then on the extra advanced level, if you wanted to get into this, we offer APIs, but it would be a custom build. So that's, again, more advanced, but if you are really interested to get the data pulled in from QuickBooks Online into a custom field, that's something you could talk to our API people about. It's not, I can't say that it's built today, but it's definitely possible in the future. And then XCM Analytics as a service, just to take that one step further. If you're not familiar with our analytics, what we do is we're able to pull data out of XCM and slice it and dice it and build you dashboards. What this would be is a custom package for analytics as a service that we would build for you and with your firm. So again, just some food for thought as we start to definitely offer those additional add-on services, and as you begin to ingrain your CAS department more and more into XCM, there's just endless possibilities. So wanted to let you all know about that. That being said, I promised that we would not go through the step-by-step guide every single step of the way. I'm going to put each slide on the screen just so that if anyone's interested in pausing or going back at a later date, you can do so. This highlights the source document collection process and kind of step-by-step what it might look like if you were using the suggested workflow mapping we saw on the screen earlier, and if you were using a remote staffing solution. This would be the task info setup, where you would then, it's instructing you to add your permanent points to fill in your anticipated delivery date fields. Then over here, you have your tasks. Your staffing section. So if it's an outsourced task, you would fill the outsourced users into the roles, versus if it was an in-house task, you would fill your firm users. What this speaks to is the fact that you can share your workflow mapping, your checklist, everything. It doesn't matter whether a remote staff person's doing it or your firm's doing it. You would build your XCM site exactly the same, and then you would control that at the staffing level. So this actually is a pretty important piece of the puzzle. This is how you would outsource the task. Again, this is just putting everything together in a comprehensive step-by-step guide. So this is actually sending it to ready for preparation, etc. And then monitoring your progress, you can either look at tasks I moved, you can go to the advanced search. Questions posted, questions answered, it's walking you through that. It's telling you how to set a new anticipated delivery date if the outsource coordinator has any conflicts when they receive all the work up to them. Firm review and task completion, it gives you some options here as to whether you want to complete it in-house or whether you want to send it back to the remote staffing member. And then this is just to sum up everything we've talked about today, the key benefits that you're getting out of the XCM solution, and even more so if you were taking advantage of our remote staffing solution. It goes through visibility, communication, and efficiency and productivity. The key aspects of any CAS department today. You can see the bullet points underneath. We don't have a whole lot of time left to go through every single item, but it was very thoughtfully crafted if you want to read through them on your own.